Welcome, everybody, to episode number 3 of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy Barker. As everyone knows, a big passion of mine is employee retention. I don't think a lot of business owners and companies understand that it has a huge impact on the bottom line, but also on your clients, potential clients, and also the employees that are left behind when employees leave. Two components of a great retention strategy are both company culture and engaging employees. So today I have asked Jeffrey Davidson with Great Teams Limited to come on and talk to us about building leadership, cultivating leadership, the importance of team building, and some strategies of how to do that. Jeffrey, appreciate you being here. Could you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this?
Well, I was born up north in Chicago. No, that's really not the background you wanted. Growing up, I had a fascination with leadership. I read Machiavelli as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
And I studied leadership in college. And then I even taught a college class, like the dean of students, and I co-taught a class on leadership. So it was kind of a fascination for me. And then along the way, I ended up becoming a president of a company in my early 30s. It was a multi-million-dollar sales company, and I was all proud of myself. But I was really an absentee leader. I had read and studied, but I didn't know what to do. There's a difference between reading a book and actually leading people. So I gave up on the whole thing, thinking, something's not working. And I went into consulting. And I learned a whole bunch. But I had a client that said, hey, can you help me build a team of analysts? And eventually I became an employee and I directed this team, eventually built it, from a team of one person up to a team of 21 or 22 over 2 years. And it ended up being the best team in the whole company. And I was proud to say it. And I was proud of my team. And they taught me how to be a leader. And that joy I felt on that team was just outstanding. And our interactions and our growth and our achievements and our accomplishment and our camaraderie, is something that I then went about studying to figure out how to share it with others, because there's such a big difference from having an organization that's not quite right, whether you have an absentee leader or a micromanager or whatever kind of leader there is today, to doing a few subtle shifts and just being the kind of leader that builds a great team. I know your passion is engagement and retention, and oh my gosh, it's such a difference. Because you've got people you like to work with, and you're doing work that makes a difference, and having fun. You don't want to leave your job. So.
Right. Yeah. And I think the importance of this is that as a leader, or maybe not even as a leader, as the boss of a company, I can try to mandate engagement and the culture, but unless I actually get involved and lead that process, it really doesn't work. I think that these initiatives have to start from the top. There has to be that level engagement by the leadership, and frankly, a big component, like you said, is listening to your people. Every team is different, and so what are some of the key things that you learned from your team as you figured out you had a great team and a great situation? What are some things that you learned from that?
Well, I learned that leadership doesn't have to be near as hard as we often make it. That a big part of it is just getting to know your people and showing that you care about them. I mean, that's kind of the summary. I don't say this very often to many people, but that's the summary of everything I do when I'm helping teams become great. Is really I'm helping the leader learn about their people, and then show the people they care. Because when you show someone you care about them, you learn about their past. You learn about their interests. You say, here's how I can help you. If they take a step outside the line, you say, oops, that looked like a misstep. What can we do to get you back inside the lines? It's just showing someone you care about them. It's not really much different than that. We do it at home, we do it with friends, we do it with family, but for some reason at work we forget about it.
Right. And
that's my goal, is to bring it back.
Yes, and I think that's important. One thing I talk about in recognition is a lot of companies, when you talk about recognition, you get pushed back because they think it's going to cost them a ton of money. But my theory has been that sometimes all it takes is maybe, I like to use the proverbial cupcake or a $10 gift certificate. And really what I think it is as well is getting out from behind your office door, from behind your computer screen, and just patting people on the back. Because and I've fallen into this trap, I have to admit, but we don't hesitate to run out and find the person who has made a misstep to try to correct it. But are we as eager to run out and pat them on the back to say, great job, thank you for being here?
I am totally in agreement with you. And, I'm a big believer that people are not identical. For me personally, a $10 gift card is great. But what I really want, what I love, when I'm an employee someplace, is I just want you to call me in front of the group and say, Jeffrey did a great job. Let's all, give him a round of applause for doing ABC. And they talk about what I did. That kind of feeds me.
Right.
My beautiful bride, she actually would hate that same thing. She just wants you to have an honest conversation with her and tell her one-on-one, thank you so much. Other people, they totally just want a little that recognition of a gift card or cupcake. If it was huge, boy, saying here's a gift card for you and the family to go out to dinner, even to Outback, people are like, wow, that's amazing that you're taking care of my family. But you got to get to know people. It doesn't take, a huge budget, but it does take a little bit of time and effort.
Right. And what do you think about interaction outside the walls of a company? And prior to my consulting, I was a construction manager with AT&T. And one thing that I strive to do was not only to have some cookouts and meals, during work time, but maybe about once a quarter, we always planned an off-site event. And it wasn't mandatory. You could come if you wanted to, but we always had a great turnout, whether it was a cookout at our house or whether we went out to a restaurant, just something to get out. And I found it to be amazing what you can learn about people and how they will open up when, you have time to sit and talk and you're not in the hustle and bustle of the day.
I love that. And I've seen a bunch of things that I like doing that. Sometimes let's just say you go out to lunch with your staff members like once a quarter, like a different staff member each time, or once a year even, or doing breakfast, or, I know some groups that go out for a drink afterwards. When you talk about having a barbecue or people coming over, I love that idea. But I also want to say, you got to know what your people like. I was reading this story just recently about this boss who he was kind of highfalutin. He was fancy. So he got tickets, for the opera to people. Well, his staff hated the opera.
Right.
So then he said, we're going to do this week-long, canoeing, team building thing. Well, his team hated that because they were missing their family. And he didn't understand how come he couldn't connect with his people. And finally, one of his trusted lieutenants said, I see what you're doing, but it's just going all wrong. It's like, what do I do? It's like, well, why didn't you do something they want to do? So we ended up getting them, everyone in the group, tickets to a wrestling match that was coming to town. Everyone showed up. everyone had a great time. And this guy who thought, well, I'm an opera guy, I'm never going to like it, he ended up having a good time. But also, he learned about his people. And they learned that he wasn't just a stuffed shirt. So I love what you're saying. Just remember to do what they want, not just what you want.
Exactly, and I think that leads into a good point about as a boss, as a leader. Sometimes we think that we have to have all of the answers, but that communication is important, and asking questions and really trying to get to know people is not a weak spot. And that's one thing I have found out with some companies that I've worked with high rates of turnover. They may say, "Oh well, Joe Smith left," and I would say, "Well, who was Joe Smith?" Well, I don't know. I will have to pull his I have to pull his employee jacket and see. I'm like, and this was a small company, so they should have had intimate knowledge of all their employees. But the fact was they didn't. They didn't take the time to ask these questions to even learn who this person was. How important do you feel that, I guess, making yourself human, kind of letting your guard down as the boss or as the leader to, there are times that we do have to lead. I don't want to minimize that.
No. And it's not about, showing every flaw, but it is about saying we're human. And you know what? I know that some people are going to listen to what we said so far, and they're going to say, Roy and Jeff were talking, and I'm supposed to know everything about your personal life. That's not actually what I mean. I mean, I think you should know if they have a family. I think you should know if they have kids. I think you should know, but I don't think you necessarily need to memorize every kid's name in the last grade and what sports they're in. You should just show enough interest to show that you care about someone, that you know some of the basics. And there's an and in here. I think you need to know something about them professionally. In other words, what did you do before? How do you think this fits in? And where do you want to go next? I think that's minimum as a person who leads people is I need to know how you want to use this job to better yourself, to better your career, to better your profession. So that I can say, here's a chance for you to help reach your goal. I mean, if you can do this and you know more about their personal lives, I think that's great. But that's an extra. I think the minimum is, knowing them, knowing a touch about their personal lives and personal history, but really understanding where what they do today fits into their own work-life picture. We all do things. We've changed jobs, we've changed companies, we've often changed careers. But what skills do you bring to this? What skills do you want to add? What do you like? What do you want to do more of? If you know the things as a boss, leader, supervisor, whatever your title is, and you do even a little bit to help your people go from where they are to reaching any part of those goals, they will appreciate you, they will work harder for you, they will be more engaged, and you will have a better team.
Correct. And I think that also goes to challenging employees, not in a bad way, but in a good way, that maybe there's not a promotion open right at this moment and you have good people on your team. If you know their interest and what their skill sets are, it makes it a lot easier to assign special projects to give them a little bit more freedom to express themselves through these skills and feel like they're really adding value to the company.
Oh, I'm with you. So, engagement isn't just something employees magically do because you decide to bring in ice cream once a month, or because you're like, oh, I'm going to be more like Google and put a bunch of free sodas in the fridge. That's not really engagement. I mean, that's a nice perk, but that doesn't mean people like their job anymore. Engagement starts when you start talking to your people.
Correct. Yes, and I'm all about the. I believe what you say. I'm all about the perks, the free sodas, the ping pong tables, and all that. But sometimes that's just fluff if we are still not communicating, asking questions, and basically building relationships. I think that's something that really runs through this is that in order to retain people, employees, you need to build some sort of a relationship and have a personal relationship with them where you can actually talk and communicate in person, not just behind a keyboard, which I find that to be I find that so often these days. And we're busy, everybody's busy, but we got to get out from behind the text and the computer and actually talk to people. So,
no, I agree. If you're behind the keyboard, when you're behind the keyboard, you're kind of you run the danger of being an absentee leader, and you're just a seat that they walk by your office, and you're too busy to even be sitting in your seat. So, talking to people's key.
Right. So that kind of gets us to the appraisals, and typically everybody does a 1-year appraisal, and the whole year goes by and you think, oh my gosh, I'm really knocking it out of the park. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Everything's rocking along. And then you get either it meets expectations or below expectations, and you don't understand why. So talk about the importance of, of this engagement conversations as we go through the whole entire year.
You can't see me, the way we're talking. I am shaking my head in a combination of sadness, sorrow, disgust. My problem with the annual performance review, and I understand you need to do it, but if that's all you're doing, it's like saying, I'm going to go spend thousands of dollars to go find the perfect tree. Imagine you spend thousands of dollars to find the perfect tree for your front yard. And then you put the tree through a training program and you water it for a couple weeks and you say, this tree looks so perfect. I'm going to build a box around it. And once a year, I'm going to open up the box and tell the tree how much I love it and how good it's doing. If you really did that to a tree in your front yard, a year later, when you open the box, the tree would be dead.
Right. That's a great analogy.
You only tell your people how they're doing once a year, you're killing them. It's like you locked them in the closet and said, hey, you're doing such a good job that here's some goals. I'm going to lock you in the closet and I'll talk to you in a year to see how you do. That's crazy talk. No one should be doing that. So this gets back to engagement and conversation. I love to transition it because it's on the same topic. And that is, people are dying to know. When people go to their jobs, in my mind, I've got a bunch of questions in my head that I don't always say. And I think it's true for every team member. And one of the questions that people ask themselves is, how am I doing? Like, I think I'm doing great. I'm trying to do great, but how am I doing? People wake up in the morning and they want to do a good job. They look in the mirrors, they're getting ready and say, I'm going to have a good day at work today. No one wakes up thinking I'm going to be a jerk. No one wakes up thinking I'm going to knock something over and make something crash and, ruin something. They all think I'm going to have a good day. But they don't know how to judge. And it's the leader's job to say, you know what? I believe that your intentions were good. And here's something you did that was good. And I think here's a way you could make it even better. Like, here's something good. I think if you tweak it a little bit, you could be a superstar. When I've had bosses like that, I stand up strong, I stand up proud, and I love that relationship because my boss is honest with me. So that's great. Now, let's be honest. If you're a leader, sometimes people aren't doing what you want. So you can also be able to say, I think your intentions were good, but you missed the mark. Let's look at how we can tweak this so that you meet my expectations, so that you satisfy the customer so that you delight the team, or whatever you need to say. So how do we take their expectations and really help them do as good as they want to do? Whether they're hitting the mark and could get better, or they're missing the mark and they need to refocus. What should they build upon? Where should they refocus? And this should not be an annual conversation. If you've got a new employee, if someone has just joined your team, in the first 2 weeks, you should be saying this a couple times a day. In the first couple months, you should be doing it daily. You know, in the first quarter, maybe you can get down to once a week. I don't know your environment. Maybe that's too long. But you should never be waiting months or a year to be telling people, hey, you mean well, and here's how you can get better. Or, hey, you mean well, you missed the mark, here's where you should refocus. That needs to be part of your regular conversation. I so strongly believe that when leaders have these conversations, their people become engaged with the work, become engaged with the meaning of their job, and do a better job.
Right, right. Yeah, and the other part, I think, is that as we communicate more often and as we give the pats on the back and reassure employees, we build this trust so that when it does come time to maybe deliver some bad news or try to change the outcome of an employee's actions, it makes that conversation much easier instead of just always feel, an employee always feeling like, oh my gosh, I never see this guy unless he's fixing to come out here and come down on me. And then another part to that is also to ask questions to understand if something's not going correctly, why is it? And a great example I had recently was there was an employee that was underperforming. He had heavy interaction with somebody else in a different department. The guy that he was used to talking to had left the company. A new guy came in, and so there was this. There was a disconnect. The other guy trying to get up to speed, and it was really impacting this other employee's job. But he didn't feel like he wanted to be a tattletale, so he kind of kept it to himself and tried to work it out. And luckily, the manager went out and tried to engage him and ask him, what is there some things going on? And all this came to light. It wasn't this employee's fault, but it was reflecting badly on him. And so that's another thing I feel we have to be careful is jumping to conclusions and to judgments before we get the input from what the real situation is. Because sometimes it could just be processes that need to be tweaked and changed as companies evolve.
Oh, there's no doubt. I've already said, I believe most people wake up and their intention is to do a good job. And I firmly believe that most often the problem with people doing a good job is they don't have the right tools, or the process is getting in the way, or there's some system that's a complication, or some red tape somewhere, or they have a dependency on someone else, either inside or outside the company, or they don't even know what they're supposed to be doing sometimes.
Right.
All these things add up to get in the way of someone doing a good job.
Correct. So what would you say are what are the hardest parts of building a great team, and maybe a couple tips on how leaders can get past these hurdles?
Oh, when building a good team or building a great team, what are the hardest parts? That's a good question. I think that there's a change in mindset if you're not used to team building. Before you're a team builder, you end up working with people, and it's all based on your individual contribution. And that all sounds good, but that doesn't help you build a team. It helps you do the job by yourself. So you have to come to realize that it's not just about you, it's about the team. And you need to help all of them become great contributors. I think that that's probably the biggest challenge is leaders think they can do it all. And if they've got a slow team member, well, they're just going to kind of put up with it until something works itself out. No, as a leader, you got to step in there, get to know them, and then help guide them to where they need to be.
Right, right. And that's something that I think a lot of leaders find it hard to do is to have those tough conversations and work with employees. And what I have found is that a lot of times that's really all it needs is just a small conversation, trying to give them either some tools or advice on what could be changed. And then, like you said, they don't, I don't know anybody that comes in and says, "Whew, I really want to do a terrible job and be a bad employee today." I think everybody comes in and tries. I think that they get frustrated because they don't get the feedback. Maybe they don't have the tools that they need. And so, as a leader, I think, that's part of our task is to develop talent. And obviously, sometimes people are thrust into our groups. We don't really have, at larger companies, we don't have a lot of say who we get, but obviously they had some skills to find their way into our group. So trying to manage that, to develop that. And sometimes even within groups, you find somebody has a strong skill set in one part. Maybe it's just tweaking their job or moving them over to a little bit different position where they can excel, which all gets back to I think the underlying theme is the communication, the asking questions, the getting to know people, building these relationships so you understand, how they work, what they do best. Very important.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's something unsaid in this conversation, and that is you need to have clear expectations for what your people should be doing. I talk with leaders all the time, and they'll say, "Oh, I am upset with Cassandra because she's not doing this." And I'll say, "Well, when was the last time you explained this to Cassandra?" And the answer is, "Well, she just knows." And I'm like, "How?" Like, "Well, we've been doing this forever." I'm like, "Well, Cassandra's been a member of the team 3 months. Who would have told her?" "Well, she should just know."
Right, exactly.
Cassandra's never going to succeed.
Exactly. Yes, and that's another thing too. Is with these clear expectation is having a good job description written down and have it evolved. Some of these jobs that were created 20 years ago, some of the expectations have changed, but yet we haven't updated our documentation and we haven't communicated that to employees as things evolve. And so here again, we get back to communicating and making sure that, we're clear on expectations.
It really is. So if you're clear on expectations, you're going to find that some of your problems go away. And when someone doesn't meet them and you have good communication, you can find out that there was a misunderstanding about it. Just because you think something is understood doesn't mean someone else really understood it. I was having dinner with my father-in-law the other day, and he didn't have in his hearing aids. Oh my gosh, we would make a statement, about someone leaping, and he's like, "Who's gone to sleep?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And it's kind of funny, when it's at the dinner table with a family or a friend, but this happens at work, and we don't realize that people heard something different than what we said. Having this clarity is so vital.
Right, and sometimes it's even good to have that other person repeat. And this is something that I've talked to groups about in the past as well, is because I have a vision of something in my mind, even if you hear the statement and hear the words that I'm saying very clearly, it can draw a whole different picture in your mind. And that doesn't mean that one's right and one's wrong. It just means that we interpret data or we interpret a situation a little bit differently. And so having the receiver of a conversation, of an important, critical conversation, repeat back what they think that you said and what direction that they think you want to go, that can also be helpful instead of just, hate to say it, gruff like this, but instead of just barking orders at somebody and saying, this, do that, this is the vision of where we want to go, is to take the time to have a true conversation to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And I guess my example where I'm not an artist, creativity is not really my thing. I'm more of a spreadsheet and numbers type guy. But I had gone to one of these painting classes where the instructor stands up at the front of the room and she paints the picture and kind of walks you through the steps. Use this brush, this color. And there were 25 or 30 people in this room. Now, we are all watching the same instructor. We're all getting the same instructions, but there were 25 or 30 different pictures that came out of that. And it's not that one was right and one was wrong. It was different interpretations of what she said and what she was doing. And for me, that translated to business as well. We can learn a lot from that, is that everybody interprets things so much differently. We have to be clear. And here again, this isn't a right or a wrong. It's just we need to make sure that we are on the same path together.
Oh, you're right. So imagine I'm sitting, talking to three of my staff members, and I say, and here's the shape our future is going to be next year. And one person heard the word shape and thought of a circle. And one person heard the word shape and thought of a square. And one person heard the word shape and thought of a triangle. Well, I said shape, and they each pictured something different. You can talk about that. Our vision for the future is we're going to double our sales. Well, one person thinks that means you're going to double the staff. One person thinks that means you're going to hire, a salesperson. One person thinks you're going to automate everything and fire everybody.
Right. Correct.
You need to get these conversations to get it all out. Because without the conversation, the clarity plummets, the understanding plummets, and then we get frustrated. Like, how could you not know? I said, here's the shape of the future. And everyone else is like, well, I'm working toward the shape. It's not my fault that my teammate's doing something wrong.
Right. Well, Jeffrey, it's been great talking to you today. I want to try to wrap up. If you wouldn't mind, just tell the audience how that they can get a hold of you, and you can talk to them further about leadership and team building.
Sure, happy to do that. First, I want to say thank you for having me on. I really appreciated your questions. Good conversation. For those people who want to learn more about building a great teams, I do something that's just for you, the podcast listener. If you go to my website, I've got a little hidden page, and it's greatteamsltd.com/more. So Great Teams Limited, the abbreviation's LTD, greatteamsltd.com/more. And what I have there is just a couple quick downloads that leaders can use to run some exercises with their teams, to double check and make sure that people have the same understanding, to learn a little bit more about their teammates so they can work together better, and to give them a chance to practice giving some feedback to each other. Not a bad word, just telling people what they can build upon and where they can refocus. How do we use these ideas to help grow our teams? So greatteamsltd.com/more will give you a few freebies for you, the podcast listener. And if you want to reach out more, click on the contact page, send me an email, and we'll start a conversation.
That's great, Jeffrey. I appreciate you having that download for them, and I'll be sure and include that in the show notes. Thank you again for being a great guest. It was a great conversation, learned a lot, and hope to have you back in the very near future.
Well, Roy, it was a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to our next conversation.